So I'm really glad to have all of you here. There's a lot to get to, but Admiral Stavridis, are the other members, big picture of G7, right to worry? What makes you nervous about Trump heading into this meeting?
Yeah, the short answer would be everything. The good news is the last G7 was such a complete diplomatic disaster that it's the lowest bar in history to get over it, to get to some improvement. So let's hope we do that. I think two things that concern me a lot. One is not going to happen, but it's this idea of bringing Russia back into the G7, I think makes no sense whatsoever. They were rejected.
Well, maybe it does if you don't realize that the reason that they got kicked out is Crimea.
Exactly. And as long as Crimea is still fully occupied, and by the way, there are thousands of Russian troops in Ukraine as distinct from Crimea, there's no reason to even contemplate bringing Russia back. And the second one to watch that I worry about as a former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO is this growing sense of unease in the alliance and the battering by President Trump. And look, we all want to see the allies raise their spending on military, and they've done it somewhat. But you feel the alliance kind of fraying at the edges. Putting the leaders in a small room like this is not going to be helpful. So those are the two that I would be worried about the most.
Yeah, and Philippe, the president made it clear at the end of last year he thought that was a complete waste of time. He has apparently said to aides going into this he doesn't understand why he has to go. Do you think there's any chance we get through these 3 days with zero drama?
No.
Zero chance.
Less than zero.
Wow.
I mean, we can't go through 1 day here or 3 days here, and it's really not that different to me.
Or 1 hour or 3 hours.
1 hour, 3 hours. Who knows what he's tweeting while we're sitting here? To me, it's almost like Ringling Brothers. You know, they take down the tents, they take the tigers, they take the elephants, and they just take it overseas. It's the same carnival. It's the same just absolute chaos. And look, to be honest with you, when he says he doesn't understand why he has to go, hopefully next year he just doesn't go, because, you know, listening to Admiral Stavridis, I've been to a few of these various number conferences with Secretary Clinton and with President Obama. You don't start from scratch at these things. They're pretty baked when you get there, and the leaders come in to kind of seal the deal. And now they've gotten to the point where everyone's just, let's not even think about doing anything. Let's just get through the week.
Well, the other thing is that if you've been in a White House with a previous president, what the staff will tell you leading up to it is he's in meetings, he's working on it, he's studying it. Very different from the way the president gears up for this, which is tweeting about whether or not his former press secretary should be on Dancing with the Stars. But, Governor, let me just show that picture again, because it's so telling from last year's summit. This photo went viral. The president sitting down, everybody's arms crossed surrounding him. Has anything changed, really, except maybe possibly the relationships have worsened, and there's obviously also growing tensions about the possibility of a global recession?
Oh, I think that's absolutely right. It's just gotten worse. And that's really what's unfortunate. I mean, we can laugh about it because it seems so absurd, and it just is inconceivable that the United States is in this position. But to have a G whatever, whether it's 7, 8, 6, 5, or I guess they're calling it 7-1 because of the United States, to have one without a communique at the end, to do no business. I mean, you're right. Everything is done ahead of time. The leaders just come in to sign the deal and to show that they're together. But they also like it.
They like this kind of unscripted time when they can be with each other face to face.
Other things. And for this president, especially when he's talking about bringing Russia back in, it's not just the Crimea. The Russian troops are in 2 other oblasts in Ukraine right now. They're fighting. There are actions going on, military actions going on. You can't bring them back in. And the fact that this president has said he might not adhere to the defense, the mutual defense part of NATO, it's thrown the whole thing into real confusion, which is destabilizing the world.
Well, one thing we know he does want to talk about is the economy. He wants a special meeting on Sunday to talk about it. But we just learned that there could possibly be retaliation from China. They say that they're going to have tariffs on an additional $75 billion worth of goods and reinstate the levies against autos. How could this change the conversation there?
Well, we're seeing two things. We're seeing countries like China, like Russia, our adversaries, or certainly our competitors, taking advantage of the gap between us and our historical allies. And what's even more concerning to me is our allies are getting used to it. And, you know, they are not expecting anything. And the governor and I were talking earlier about, to some extent, they just think they got to gut it out. They just have to get past Trump, whether it's 1 year, 5 years. But what Trump misunderstands is he takes his domestic approach overseas. So he thinks he can bully people. He thinks that he can bully the way he bullies Congress. If you don't do this that I want to do, I'm going to take this away from you. If Lockheed Martin doesn't lower the price on their jets, I'm going to take away the contract. You cannot do that with sovereign nations. And what sovereign nations are doing, and that photo was perfect, sovereign nations are saying, dude, we're going to move on without you.
Yeah.
You know, we don't need you. We don't, you know, we can go over your head. We can cut you out. And that's really unfortunate.
Yeah, and this is somebody who thinks
Yeah.
you can buy a sovereign territory. And, you know, the leader of Denmark says, oh, no, you can't. Very serious topic, climate change, because the other pictures we're seeing, Governor, as a former EPA administrator, I'm sure this has struck you to the core. The pictures out of the Amazon. I mean, it's burning. Macron has tweeted about it, you know, basically said the world's on fire. This is a tragic situation that we must address at the top of our agenda. In your mind, what should the U.S. role be here and what will it be?
We should be a leader. And how do we address this in an economically feasible way? I mean,
Can you overstate the potential impact of what we're seeing?
No. And you have the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the United States have called this a crisis. They said this is a national security issue. We ought to care about that. Never mind what we see happening in our own shores when we see these superstorms come in, we see sea level rise. In Alaska, we're having to move Native Alaskan villages.
And by the way, tremendous number of fires in Alaska this year, too.
And tremendous number of fires in Alaska, and then you have it all along the coast as well. And you have cities now in Florida that are actually putting together plans. They've outlined which businesses are going to have to move where, who do they move first, how do they move. It's very complicated and very expensive. We got to start dealing with this. We can't stop it, but we can sure slow it down, and we can get to a point where we can plan for it intelligently.
Another really interesting dynamic, Kristen Welker brought this up, Admiral, the president's interactions with the new UK leader, Boris Johnson. The Washington Post reports that the president views his planned meeting as the only bright spot of the entire summit. And CNBC describes the tough spot that Johnson is in. Quote, in sum, the UK finds itself in a tricky position at the same time that it is trying to court EU leaders before an October 31st deadline for Brexit. It's trying to woo Trump, not the most popular person in Europe right now. How do you see this meeting?
I think that's precisely correct. Boris Johnson, on the one hand, needs to try and move the rest of the European Union. In a normal world, this would be an ideal moment for him to do that. He can kind of walk along the beaches of Biarritz and have quiet conversations with Angela Merkel and Macron. Unfortunately, everyone's watching everybody else like in junior high school to see who's hanging out with President Trump, not scoring points with the rest of the European Union. So Johnson is really in an impossible situation here, and that's unfortunate for the United States because we have a vested interest in a strong, capable United Kingdom. What I worry about at the really dark end of the spectrum here is that this whole movement toward Brexit will unlock the Scottish departure from the United Kingdom, and that continued ripple effect could be very, very detrimental to our oldest, best partner. So that's really one to watch about. And the other point I want to make that we brought up a moment ago is this whole idea of our standing in the world, our ideas. And people say to me sometimes, you know, you're right, Admiral, it's a war of ideas out there. No. It's a marketplace of ideas. We got to compete in that marketplace. And to do that, we have to be reasonable advocates working together. That's what we needed at G7. Unfortunately, that's not what we're going to get.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.